Hey YouTube, I'm Mr. Terry, a high school history teacher. Welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video. All right, in today's video, we're checking out a video from TED Ed. So these are the people that do TED Talks and other educational content. And one of the cool kind of video formats they have is they put somebody from history on trial. So they, get to defend themselves or give their points of view, but then you have like a prosecutor that goes after them. And the format is pretty cool, and there's a bunch of videos out there, but this is one I had not seen yet, and I really wanted to watch it with you. And it is History versus Vladimir Lenin. So I think this is great to talk about. Vladimir Lenin, a member of the Bolshevik party that led to the rise of communism in what's going to be the Soviet Union. So it'll be interesting to see the different kind of perspectives of what Vladimir Lenin did and his beliefs. And if you don't know, or you think you do know much about Vladimir Lenin, you're going to want to watch this, I think, because a lot of people don't distinguish, Vladimir Lenin from like Karl Marx's beliefs, and also Vladimir Lenin from Joseph Stalin. So let's learn a little bit more about Vladimir Lenin. I'm going to add my perspective as a teacher and what I know, and I think we can learn a lot together. Now, at the end of this video, after the court case, I want to see what you think about this case versus Vladimir Lenin. What do you think? Let's see those comments down below. All right, let's get started. All right, you're on trial, Mr.
He was
Lenin.
one of the most influential figures of the 20th century, forever changing the course of
Not
one
his
of
real
the
name, by
world's
the way.
largest countries. But was he a hero who toppled an oppressive tyranny, or a villain who replaced it with another?
Man,
It's time to put Lenin on the stand.
right away, just so, it's such a divisive figure. There's a lot of people that are very inspired by what he did with the Russian Revolution. And then also people that have villainized him and put him at the top of lists of people that people hate among the top of the 20th century. So let's see.
History versus Lenin. Order. Now, wasn't it your fault that the band broke up?
What?
Your Honor, this is Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, aka Lenin, the rabble-rouser who helped overthrow the Russian Tsar Nicholas II in 1917 and founded the Soviet Union, one of the worst dictatorships of the 20th century.
Right away. There's a long time between the Russian Revolution and 1917, which had two phases, one of which took down the actual monarchy, which was seen as very oppressive for a long, long time, and was very unpopular by a lot of people, especially of the lower classes. But then also the creation of the Soviet Union. Then there's going to be a brutal civil war for a few years. And then you get really the stability, I guess, if you want to call that, and really the kind of the, I guess, real implementation, I guess, at the beginning of the Soviet Union.
Oh.
In the early 20s.
The Tsar was a bloody tyrant under whom the masses toiled in slavery.
Not forget
This
World
is
War
rubbish. Serfdom had already been abolished in 1861.
Right.
And replaced by something worse. The factory bosses treated the people
That's an
far
important
worse
point.
than their former feudal landlords. And unlike the landlords, they were always there. Russian workers toiled for 11 hours a day and were the lowest paid in all of Europe. But
Yeah, so what he's trying to explain there, that was a big criticism, was, yes, serfdom was ended years before this. However, living conditions did not change. And that's more important than anything, is not what the, to those Russian people, which was not the definition of what it is it's serfdom or whatever, but it's about the life, right? Maybe some peasants, some serfs, end up going into factories, which Russia was trying to catch up on industrialization to the rest of the world, which they had fallen, behind on mightily. But the working conditions didn't improve. So going from serfdom and having some kind of legal obligation to a landlord did not, the conditions stayed very much the same even afterwards. So that's what the case would be there.
Tsar Nicholas made laws to protect the workers. He reluctantly did the bare minimum to avert revolution, and even there he failed. Remember what happened in 1905 after his troops fired on peaceful petitioners? Yes, and the Tsar ended the rebellion by introducing a constitution and an elected parliament, the Duma, while retaining absolute power and dissolving them whenever he wanted.
Yeah, it wasn't a very powerful organization, the Duma. Their kind of first parliament, if you want to call it that. supposed to have elected, has elected officials in it.
There would have been more reforms in due time if radicals like Lenin weren't always stirring up trouble. Your Honor, Lenin had seen his older...
That wouldn't hold up in a court case, right? You can't do hyperbole, okay? Conjecture, right? So someone would be like, objection. I don't know exactly how it works, but...
brother, Alexander, executed by the previous Tsar for revolutionary activity.
Lenin's
And even
family
after
was
the reforms
had a long
Nicholas
history.
continued the same mass repression and executions, as well as the unpopular
criminal behavior in the eyes of the
involvement
monarchy.
in World War I that cost Russia so many lives
World War I
and
context,
resources.
so important.
Sorry.
Yeah, World War I context is so important here because a lot of people say that was the kind of final straw that propelled the working conditions and the political, I guess, makeup and everything of Russia here and put it to its edge. Right, the war was not going well up to that point in 1917. Seen some earlier successes, but it wasn't going very well, and a lot of people put blame in Tsar Nicholas's leadership at that time of why the war was not going well, and so that ended up becoming quite for some members and anti-revolutionaries a part of their platform, which was to try to pull Russia out of the war. But we'll see if they get to it. Even after the revolution, they still fought the war for a little bit. Okay? At least until like Lenin really came power after the October Revolution.
Doesn't sound like such a capital
February and
fellow.
October 1917.
Your Honor, maybe Nicholas II did doom himself with bad decisions, but Lenin deserves no credit for this. When the February 1917 uprisings finally forced the Tsar to abdicate, Lenin was still exiled in Switzerland.
That's true.
So who came to power? The Duma formed a provisional government led by Alexander Kerensky, an incompetent bourgeois failure. He even launched another failed offensive in the war, where Russia had already lost so much, instead of ending it like the people wanted. It was a constitutional social democratic government, the most progressive of its time. And it could have succeeded eventually if Lenin hadn't returned in April,
More hyperbole.
sent by the Germans to undermine the Russian war effort and instigate riots.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the story of Lenin coming back to Russia is so fascinating during the war. And just in brief, you didn't know. Again, Lenin and his whole family had long had issues with the government and had been in trouble and stuff like that. They were very much high profile that way. And Lenin was exiled and went to Switzerland. And the Germans saw during the war to get him back into Russia would be something beneficial, right? Because they knew about his anti-monarchy stance and possibility of him wanting to, not supporting the war and getting Russia out of the war. And Germany saw to getting him smuggled. And I mean, I could use that term because they snuck him in on a train back to Russia with money to basically and I think weapons to basically get a revolution started. It was kind of like planting a bomb inside of Russia to help it blow up. And for all the gambles that Germany made in World War I, which there are so many, this was one that kind of in the short term paid off in the fact that it worked. I mean, the revolution happened, that eventually the new government is going to negotiate with the Germans to pull them out of the war, which then led Germany to not have to worry so much about a two-front war. I guess in the long term, you could see it as a negative because you're going to have World War II, where the Soviet Union will be successful against the Germans and leading to the fall of that Germany, which is a different Germany in a lot of ways because it's one led by a Nazi party rather than the German Empire. So
slander. The July days were a spontaneous and justified reaction against the government's failures. And Kerensky showed his true colors when he blamed Lenin and arrested and outlawed his Bolshevik party, forcing him to flee into exile again. Some democracy. It's a good thing the government collapsed under their own incompetence and greed when they tried to stage a military coup, then had to ask the Bolsheviks for help when it backfired. After that, all Lenin had to do was return in October and take charge.
Yep.
The government was peacefully
October
overthrown
Revolution.
overnight.
So in February of that year, 1917, a revolution to take down the monarchy was successful, and there was a provisional government, right? It was, it continued a lot of policies, and the fact that they continued the war through the rest of that year. But then you get like a second revolution or second version of a revolution. That's like the communist revolution, because the first part of the revolution, again in February, was more about taking down the monarchy, but the second one was more about the establishment of, you know, eventually communism and the Soviet Union, socialism, those types of things. Depending on which terminology, because they use the term like socialist at the beginning, and then they're going to use a bigger term, communism, later on. But definitions of those words and things, check out some of my other videos. You can see of socialism and communism, and see a little bit more if you need to understand the differences between those terms.
But what the Bolsheviks did after gaining power wasn't very peaceful. How many people did they execute without trial?
They were brutal.
And was it really necessary to murder the Tsar's entire family?
That's what they did.
Even the children?
Obliterated
Russia was being
them.
attacked by foreign imperialists trying to restore the Tsar. Any royal heir that was rescued would be recognized as a ruler by foreign governments. It would have been the end of everything the people had fought so hard to achieve. Besides,
that's another, both cases there, you know, that they're bringing here are doing a lot of what ifs, or if, you know, time had done, if this had happened, then this would happen. You saw the prosecutor doing that a lot. Well, the Duma needed more time, or Alexander could have, or Nicholas could have, you know, needed more time to improve working conditions. But now the defense here of Lenin is also saying things like, hey, if they hadn't, I guess, brutally massacred every single one of the Romanov family, then a foreign government would then, you know, see to any surviving family member of would restore the monarchy and that stuff. And that's all what if stuff too. And those things don't, you know, those are all just things you can sit there and debate about, but how can you prove those sort of things? Especially if you're trying to do like a court of law, which is what they're doing here. Those things just don't work.
Lenin may not have given the order. But it was not only imperialists that the Bolsheviks killed. What about the purges and executions of other socialist and anarchist parties, their old allies?
That's
what about the Tambov Rebellion, where peasants resisting grain confiscation were killed with poison gas?
Yeah.
Or sending the army to crush the workers in Kronstadt, who were demanding democratic self-management. Was this still fighting for the people?
The early years, they tried to have something far more democratic, and actually, in those early years, something more capitalistic, in the fact that having private owners for things, was ownership of land and things like that, was still, you know, something that people were, a lot of people were supportive of, and they tried to do that even under Lenin's years. He tried to do things again. There was a lot more capitalist intentions actually in the early times, but then that didn't last very long. So again, that was the problem I feel like with the Russian Revolution, was it meant different things to different people at different times, right? What happened in February of 1917 is not what happened in October of 1917, and then the Civil War that's going to bring out. It was a lot more divisive and non-unified, and really it's just going to come out to which individual faction is going to arise, and which one is going to be the most powerful. In the end, it will be the Bolshevik Party, because there's a lot of different groups.
Yes. The measures were difficult, but it was a difficult time. The new government needed to secure itself while being attacked from all sides, so that the socialist order could be established. And what good came of this socialist order? Even after the Civil War was won, there were famines, repression, and millions executed or sent to die in camps, while Lenin's successor, Stalin, established a cult of personality and absolute power.
If they're going to bring in the Stalin stuff, Vladimir Lenin on his deathbed basically said, don't let Joseph Stalin have power. He, by the end, was really untrusting of him. Stalin was Lenin's goon. He's the guy that you can get to do the dirty work, right? But Lenin did not want to see that guy in a leadership position. And he was right about what he feared about Stalin was his tyrannical behavior, and personality was not something that Lenin wanted. Did not want to see that. But as you'll see, when Lenin dies, Stalin is going to be able to maneuver his way into power eventually.
That wasn't the plan.
Right.
Lenin never cared for personal gains. Even his enemies admitted that he fully believed in his cause.
He lived pretty well.
And working tirelessly from his student days until his too early death. He saw how power-hungry
Those officials
Stalin
lived
was
pretty
and
well.
tried to warn the party. But it was too late.
Right.
And the decades of totalitarianism that followed after? You can call it that. But it was Lenin's efforts that changed Russia in a few decades from a backward and undeveloped monarchy full of illiterate peasants to a modern industrial superpower. with one of the world's best educated populations, unprecedented opportunities for women, and some of the most important scientific advancements of the century. Life may not have been luxurious, but nearly everyone had a roof over their head and food on their plate, which few countries have achieved.
This is just now devolving into a pros versus con things. Were there enough pros than cons in the future Soviet Union era? But if we're going to start again focus on Lenin, yeah, the worst things. His party was advocating for women's rights a lot more. A lot of people say that the Soviet Union with Lenin and later on with women having more rights and more access to certain to things. As compared to a lot of Western capitalist nations. That's always been something that you'll see supporters of this system and what happened in the Soviet Union. You'll see them talk about that quite a bit.
But these advances could still have happened even without Lenin and the repressive regime he established. Yes, and I could have been a famous rock and roll singer, but
it's true. The judge
sounded.
Wait, what did you say? I missed that.
Singer, but how would I have sounded? We can never be sure how
the judge is
things
picking
could
up
have
the what if
unfolded
questions,
if
which are
different
pointless.
people were in power or different decisions were made. But to avoid the mistakes of the past, we must always be willing to put historical figures on trial.
I like that. All right, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to be the jury here. Now, I didn't necessarily see. They didn't really necessarily see what is the crime, I guess, committed. So I guess we have to just kind of arrange this in a way of just Vladimir Lenin as an analysis, right? What's your analysis of Vladimir Lenin based off of what you saw here? The case that supported what he was doing, and then the cases against what the means were that maybe Vladimir Lenin took and his supporters took to establish their goals and that sort of thing. And if you want, I guess, bring in if you want to look at it in hindsight, because that's something I guess you're going to be doing is post Lenin. That's hard to do a lot if you're going to use that case, but I guess we can decide whatever we want to do. Do we want to, again, talk about the effects of Vladimir Lenin or just talk about the person himself? So in a way, I guess you could put two different rulings on that, but nevertheless, I want to hear what you think. So put down in the comments, what do you think about this case versus Vladimir Lenin? I'd love to read it and see what you have. With that, I think this was a lot of fun. If you'd like to see more of these, because they have a few more of these like cases of history versus people, let me know, because I think it could be really fun, and I love to interact with you all and give you all a chance to interact back and give your ideas, hopefully in a positive, meaningful way. And make sure you're nice to each other down in the comments, all right? Again, video link is down below if you'd like to check this out. You definitely should support the originals. And with that, we'll see you next time. Bye.